Hey everybody, Coldon here with another VOX Immortalis commentary guide. This video is for normal Spine of Deathwing, and this is 10-man. So this video starts just a few seconds into the encounter, and it's worth noting that as soon as you begin this battle, you are immediately thrown into the fight. So you don't get a chance to really sort of set up along your battlefield like you would in most fights, plan out your positioning or anything like that. So it's important that your raid sort of knows exactly what strategy you're going to do and how to execute it right away. So on this first run through the fight, I'll go over most of the mechanics, the adds that you'll face, and how you do the overall fight. And then the second run through, I'll actually talk about the strategic points and how we actually handled all that stuff on the encounter in the video here. So once you start the fight, you'll immediately drop on the center of Deathwing's back, hence on the spine of Deathwing. And you can see below all the raid members right now, we are on this raised sort of spine surface on his back. And as long as most of the raid stays on this center area, up and down his spine, Deathwing will keep flying in a straight direction and you'll be fine. However, if at any time the majority of the raid moves to one side or the other, to the left or the right of the spine, he will then notice that and start to roll in one direction, trying to knock everyone off. And if you are not attached to his back in some way when this happens, you will be thrown off immediately and killed outright. And I'll talk about how you become attached later. But essentially, the key here is the first thing people need to practice is just completely staying on that stationary center line of his spine, the raised platform area. As long as you do that, for most of the fight, you'll do it properly and you'll be fine. If you are moving from one side or the other, you should be doing it as a group on command, essentially. So the next main mechanic is once you spawn into the fight, you'll actually see 4 tentacles called Corruption, 2 on either side. And you can see one to my left there right now. And these are fairly weak. They have 450,000 health or so. And they don't need to be tanked or anything. And they have 2 basic abilities. The first is a very frequent absorb effect that's cast on a random raid member for each corruption that's active. And this absorb actually absorbs healing applied to that player. So throughout the fight, most of the healing that your healers do will be actually trying to get rid of this absorption effect. Basically, when someone has an absorb, any healing done to them, instead of actually applying to get rid of any negative health they may have lost, instead it applies to the total absorption required to get rid of that effect. And I think the total absorb is like 200,000 or something like that. So essentially, when someone has the absorb, I'm healing them as a healer, just trying to get to that 200,000 mark of healing total to get the effect off. And at that point, then I can actually heal them for any damage they may have taken up to that point. So it's a slow it's sort of a DPS requirement, or excuse me, a healing per second requirement in the sense that you have to, heal X amount before you can actually recover someone's health. As I said, though, as a healer, that's what you'll do most of the time. There's not a lot of raid damage or tank damage on this fight, except in very minor bursts, which I'll talk about. So the next mechanic for Corruption Tentacles is very infrequent compared to the absorption, but it's a stun called Fiery Grip. And this is cast on a random raid member, again, and it's a channeled stun for about 30 seconds, but you can break it by either bubbling or ice blocking that player itself, or you can attack the corruption. So for the corruption, you just have to simply do enough damage to it that it will break its stun lock on the player. And this seems to be about 15 or 20% of its health and damage. So around 100,000 or so. It's a little enough, though, that you don't want really multiple people to attack it to break it. We just have one range DPS assigned to attack the corruption when someone gets stunned. They'll call out for it. And this works pretty well. The reason you don't want to actually do more damage than necessary to break the stun is because you don't want to kill corruptions too early. You can have multiple corruptions active at one time, but if you kill the last corruption that's currently active, a new one will spawn immediately. So you can never have less than 1 corruption tentacle at any given time. So once you're down to 1, you just keep him there and just do a little bit of damage to him. So that's corruptions. The next thing is once a corruption tentacle is killed, it will spawn a new type of ad in its place in that sort of fiery pit that it came from, called a hideous amalgamation. And these are the main mobs that will be tanked throughout the fight, in addition to the corrupted blood. So the amalgamations just spawn one time from one corruption death. And once the tank picks it up, they have a lot of health. They hit for a decent amount by themselves, but the real danger is if you get a lot of them on one tank. And depending on your strategy, that may happen. And I'll talk about, again, our strategy and how we get rid of amalgamations, so we only have to deal with one of them at a time. So that said, the amalgamation and in conjunction with corrupted bloods are the key to actually winning this fight and progressing through the stages of it. So your main goal here is to use an amalgamation, have it absorb corrupted blood when they die, and with those absorption stacks, eventually kill itself via a sort of self-destructive nuclear blast. And this blast will cause one of the plates in Deathwing's armor along his spine here to be knocked up in the air, giving you access to the tendon that holds it. Once you kill the tendon, it knocks the plate off, and after 3 plates have been knocked off, you win the encounter. So, the main thing you're trying to do with the hideous amalgamation is when it initially spawns, your DPS should all start attacking it pretty heavily. You want to get it low health, but not kill it right away. So find that sweet spot for your DPS. For us, we tend to stop around 25 or 30% health. And from that point, we actually stop damage on it until it absorbs blood, until it reaches 9 total blood stacks. And the blood themselves, they're just tanked like any normal boss or mob is, so your tank can pick those up. And when they die, they sort of spawn these blood essence things underneath them. And these are just non-targetable tiny blobs that will float toward the closest open fiery wound on the back here and try to go back inside Deathwing to heal him up or whatever they do. It doesn't matter. But if an amalgamation is brought within melee range of any of those blood essences, the leftovers after a blood dies, it will absorb those and gain a stack of blood. So, now that we've looped back through to the start, let me talk about the initial mechanics, how we do our strategy. So the first thing we do is when we spawn in, I mentioned we have 4 corruption tentacles. You didn't see all 4 right away, but trust me, there were. So what we do is we actually mark the back right one and just call that we're not going to kill the back right corruption. I mentioned you can only have a minimum of 1 corruption active, so killing all 4 just causes a new one to spawn. So we kill the front 2 and the back left one. And as soon as those are dead, we all stack up purposely as a raid on the front left fiery marker on his back there. And I mentioned when you move off the center of the spine to the left or the right, if the majority of the raid does that, Deathwing will roll. So moving to the front left, we cause him to roll to the left. And when he does this, since the raid is actually stacked on that fiery area, we all get grabbed by these tendrils that hold us to the spine and we don't get thrown away. However, the 3 hideous amalgamation spawns that we got from killing the 3 corruption tentacles, remember once per tentacle, those 3 are not attached to the spine, and they immediately get thrown off. So we get rid of 3 amalgamations quickly. And then we're left with the 1 corruption in the back right. So then we actually move to the front right and have him spin to the right this time. And even though we don't have amalgamations active at this time, that's for the achievement. We're just trying to get the achievement for someone. But essentially, once you throw those amalgamations off, you go back to the center of the spine. Then you kill off the lone corruption tentacle that you saved. You get 1 amalgamation, and since no corruption tentacles are active, a new one immediately spawns. So in this case, the back left location, it spawned 1. And we leave that corruption alone since it doesn't do any good to kill it. So now we've got 1 amalgamation active and our minimum of 1 corruption tentacle active, and that's what we want. This means that absorption effect casts will be a lot fewer, the fiery grip stuns from the tentacle will also be a lot fewer, and we can use only 1 tank because there's not a lot of stuff to actually tank. There's only 1 amalgamation active. So then we do the blood stacking thing with the amalgamation. We tank it near the plate and once it gets 9 stacks, we actually kill it, and then it will do a nuclear blast explosion, and if it's within 10 yards or so of the plate, it knocks the plate up, and you saw there. Once the plate is knocked in the air, we can attack a burning tendon, and as long as you kill the burning tendon within 24 seconds or so, it will knock the plate off. Once the plate is knocked off, you can see you get 2 more fiery pits with corruption tentacles in them. So that's 2 extra ones plus the initial one you had on the phase. So again, the process basically repeats. We kill 2 corruption tentacles, leaving 1. So in this case, we kill the 2 left ones and we left the right one there. And we have 2 amalgamations. So then we all stack up in one of the pits to attach the entire raid. This causes Deathwing to roll, throwing off the 2 amalgamations. And once the roll is complete, we move back to the center. He straightens out. Then we kill the soul corruption tentacle, spawning the amalgamation that you see that just appeared. Now we have a new corruption behind us somewhere, doesn't matter. And again, back to the general setup. 1 amalgamation only, so easy to tank, and 1 corruption tentacle only, so very few debuffs or absorbs. And then the process repeats. The corrupted blood spawn from the fiery holes where corruption tentacles were. But again, if you're a tank, you can grab them. They're not that dangerous at all, and they die really easily. The key is to make sure your DPS can get the amalgamation low enough health without killing it that it will be able to be killed off quickly once it reaches 9 stacks. Because as soon as it hits 9 stacks, it starts to do a pulsing fire AE that's pretty decent damage. This is probably where you need to use raid cooldowns if you need to mitigate damage. The other time you might is when you're actually stacked in one of the fiery pits for the roll portion. So I tend to use my cooldowns at one of those times, basically. So here you see the amalgamation got 9 stacks. We burned it down. And if it has 9 stacks and you kill it, it will stay at 1 health and do the nuclear blast, which it just did there. And as long as your tank keeps it close enough to that plate toward the head of Deathwing, it will knock it up like it's doing here. And then we get access to the burning tendon. All DPS should then immediately switch and kill the burning tendon. And I was wrong. You have 23 seconds to kill it, but whatever, same difference. So since you're going to do that 3 times, it's generally a good idea to plan out your DPS cooldowns accordingly. So generally what we do is use personal DPS cooldowns on the first tendon, then we bloodlust the second one, and then personal cooldowns again on the third. But any sort of combination will obviously work. And the DPS requirement isn't that high, but we use 1 tank and 2 healers because, again, the tanking requirement's very low with this setup, and healing is not that challenging when you're also doing this setup, since there's really just the absorptions and tank damage. So then the process just repeats. It does get slightly more complicated as the fight progresses, just because you have more corrupted bloods that are spawning at any given time. And this means that, like, all those corrupted bloods that just died there below my character, you can sort of see these fiery essences that they left over that are going toward the hole. Those are the things that the amalgamation will absorb if they're brought on top. So you can see as soon as the amalgamation goes over, it's going to get quickly 4 or 5 stacks. There, it's got 4 right away, 5 now, 6 now. So that's something to be aware of. You don't want to get it to 9 immediately, because then it'll just be doing that fiery pulse all the time until your DPS can actually kill it. And you also want to try to tank it near the plate, because once it's sort of dead, you can't move it if it's starting to do its nuclear blast. So you need to make sure it's at the plate before it's actually killed off. But yeah, that's the basic fight. So again, our strategies works really well just for minimizing the tanking and healing requirement. So kill off 3 corruptions, spin him, then get 1 amalgamation, explode the plate, kill 2 corruptions, spin him, then get an amalgamation, kill the plate, then 2 corruptions, spin him, and kill off the final plate. And it's pretty easy. So you can see we just have a massive amount of bloods because we have all these fiery holes active, but they do very little damage to a tank, and they can just kill them on their own pretty much. So DPS are just burning down the tendon, and this is the third one, so this is the end of the fight. And yeah, so that's the normal spine of Deathwing. Good luck, and thanks for watching.